everyone. Welcome to this very special session here at the Shell. I'm Claire Zhao, a partner and AI lead here at GSV, and it is such an honor to be here with Sal Khan, the founder and CEO of Khan Academy. We're going to talk a little bit today about the journey from YouTube to GPT-4, the lessons we've learned along the way, and where education might be headed in the age of AI. So Sal, I have to tell you, I've listened to hours and hours of your voice, and probably at this point could replicate your handwriting. How many of you in the audience, like me, have passed a class because of this man's voice? Yeah. Amazing. Well, I want to start with the beginning. Khan Academy turns 20 next year?
Yeah, in some way, depending on where you say the starting line was. But let's go with that.
You started out with tutoring your cousin with YouTube videos.
Yes, 2004, tutoring cousin. The first cousin was Nadia. I actually just got back from her wedding. It was actually after my wedding, so it's come full circle now.
Wow.
I officiated, so
Nice.
That might be my new thing.
In addition to all the things you run.
But I still had a day job back then, and it was in 2000. So 2004 started tutoring cousins. 2005 started writing the software. I guess that's the first time I got the domain name Khan Academy, so that would be 20 years. 2006, the first YouTube videos. 2007 is when I incorporated it as a nonprofit, and then 2009 is when I quit my day job. 2010 is when we got our first funding. So you could pick your start date.
Okay. And now today you're serving over 150 million users?
Yeah, depends on how I think the registered users, which are constant, it's like 180 million, but yes, it's a lot.
And an AI tutor. So how has your view of technology and this recent AI explosion reshaped how you're thinking about the direction that Khan Academy as a platform is heading?
Yeah, any moment like this, and this is a moment we're in, and it's actually a compounding series of moments that we're in. It's very easy to get caught up with the new technology and this or that, and we were already getting caught up with this or that before generative AI became a thing, and now everything's accelerated. It's always healthy to just take a step back and say, like, what are we even here for? And Khan Academy, in my mind, well, I think there's two things. There's a question of, like, why do we exist as a nonprofit? And it's this idea that education especially, market forces can do great things, but sometimes it doesn't lead to outcomes that are maybe associated with our values. And you see that sometimes that in education, sometimes in healthcare. And when you have this opportunity to leverage technology to broadly not only disseminate but improve the quality of education, in theory that should be the goal of the public school system or government, but we know that they might not have the resources or the R&D or the nimbleness to do it. So that's where the not-for-profit sector. And so our mission as a not-for-profit is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And it's amazing because I literally wrote that after I didn't even know I had to come up with a mission statement. But when I filled out the paperwork with the IRS, this is back in 2007, has like mission, colon, and a line and a half. I'm like, I don't know, I'll just whatever to get the paperwork done. Free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And it stuck. It's one of those things where sometimes it's better if you don't spend months thinking about something. And when I think about, obviously the free and the anyone, anywhere speaks to how do you disseminate, how do you drive everyone having access, but world-class in my mind has always been a combination of how do you give out everyone access to really high-quality materials, but also how do you personalize. I've always talked about, and I'm talking about it even more now, Alexander the Great, young Alexander the Great had Aristotle as his personal tutor. That's a world-class education. But when we had mass public education, when we introduced it, which was a great idea, it massively improved society, but we had to make compromises. Those compromises were batching students together in groups of 30, moving them at a set pace. Some kids are retaining it, but a lot of kids are accumulating gaps. Those gaps become debilitating. So another dimension of Khan Academy isn't to just disseminate, hopefully, high-quality videos and practice problems and teacher tools, but also to help maybe using technology to approximate elements of what Aristotle did for Alexander the Great or what I did for Nadia 20 years ago. And we have been approximating it with videos and software and teacher tools. The teacher, I think, in an ideal world, students have access to a teacher, and the teacher is the best source of engagement, accountability, and support. But of course, there was also cases where, young girl in Afghanistan, they have nothing. We want to be there for them. But then when generative AI became a thing, when we first saw it 2.5 years ago, we said, okay, this clearly could be get us that much closer, especially if it continues to improve at this rate, to approximate Sal for Nadia or Aristotle for Alexander the Great, and as many folks know, and teachers could use this support. If you told every teacher, what if we got you teaching assistants to help you grade, to help you develop lesson plans, and actually I'm also going to help tutor your students, and we're going to use that information to refine your lesson plans. I think most teachers like, that sounds great. And so that's where I see the opportunity.
And you mentioned back in 2022, I believe, you had an early preview to GPT-4. What was your reaction at the time? How do you see it immediately? I see them fitting into the Khan Academy platform. What kind of guided your vision around integrating AI into Khan Academy?
Yeah, and there's a tongue-in-cheek, I will say, theory within Khan Academy that benevolent aliens are helping us prepare humanity for first contact. And this scenario is, I take as one of the points of evidence of this very legitimate theory. And in summer of 2022, I get an email from Sam Altman and Greg Brockman. I had kind of bumped into them at a few events here. I didn't know them that well, but they wrote a very short email. There's like, hey, we're in the final stages of training our next model. We think this is going to be the model that really opens up people's eyes. We want to potentially launch with social positive use cases with organizations that people trust, that have the technical capability, and we thought of you. And I was skeptical. I had seen GPT-2, GPT-3, very, very cool, but not ready for prime time. GPT-2 was, it kind of looked like writing, but it was kind of gibberish. GPT-3, a little bit more cogent, but it couldn't really seem like it was making sense of things. But I was, just as a tech nerd, I was curious, hey, what's this going to be? Not thinking it would evolve, it would change anything at Khan Academy. But when two weeks later, they showed what would eventually become GPT-4. And just to give everyone context, this is about 5 months before ChatGPT comes out. And ChatGPT wasn't built on GPT-4, it was built on GPT 3.5. But when we saw that, and they put up a biology question, and they said, Sal, what's the answer? I'm like, okay, the choice, it's C, it's osmosis, and it was able to answer it, and it was able to explain the answer. And we're all used to this now, but in the summer of 2022, this blew my mind. And it turns out there's a reason why they were giving me a biology question. When Bill Gates saw GPT-3, he said, this is cute, but I'll only be impressed when this can pass an AP biology exam. Nice. And so when I saw it, I said, oh, have it write other questions like this, et cetera. And at least on that first pass, it wrote some pretty legitimate questions. Now, we know now that there's still some issues with accuracy and hallucinations. So they're like, hey, do you want to try this out? Do you want access? And I think this was before even all of OpenAI had access. And so they gave myself and Christian, our chief learning officer, access. And that weekend, and just to give you a sense of how early and how emergent everything was, right when they gave us access, we had a little Slack thread going with Greg Brockman. And I said, Greg, does this work only in English or in other languages? And he's like, oh, I think it's only English. And then I'm like, oh, let me just try out. And so my family is originally from Bengal. I have barely functional Bengali. But I tried to speak to it in Bengali, and it replied back in Bengali. And so I took a screenshot, and I sent it to Greg, and he said, oh, yeah, when you asked that, we tried it out, and we realized it speaks every language. So they literally,
wow.
They didn't know. And then that weekend, myself and Kristen, we started prompting it, and we were sending Slack messages that, hey, look, I just got it to rewrite the Declaration of Independence in the tone of Donald Trump. It's incredible. And it did. It was, it's going to be the best country, and George III's a loser, the biggest loser. He was a loser. But then we started prompting it, okay, you're an empathetic tutor, blah, 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 blah. And it had some issues. It was having trouble at that early stage with things like 3 + 8. Okay. But on humanities subjects, if you asked it to be an empathetic tutor and be Socratic and not give the answer, it was doing some pretty cool stuff. And so we said, okay, if this keeps improving, this could be very relevant. We got more access for the team at Khan Academy, but we had all the debates that, frankly, people are still having. It could be used for cheating. How do you handle biases, privacy? And I told the team, look, this is going to be a big deal if we're serious about world-class education and scaling it. We've got to write down all those risks and turn them into features, and then just keep moving forward. We started working on what would eventually become Conigo, which was due to launch the same day as GPT-4, which was March of 2023. And then this is interesting. A lot of people don't realize November 30th, the day that ChatGPT came out, I was really worried because they had us all lawyered up with non-disclosure agreements, et cetera. I was like, what are they doing? They just launched something. And I Slacked them, And Greg's like, we didn't launch anything. All we did is we put, if folks remember, they had written a bunch of apps, like 20 apps on top of GPT 3.5, which had been out for like 6 or 7 months, and no one had noticed. Like some middle school kids could have written ChatGPT, but no one thought to do it. And OpenAI just did that as just a demo. And they thought they were doing that in preparation for the GPT-4 launch to give people a sense of what it's like to chat with an AI. But then the whole world exploded. They did not expect ChatGPT to be anything. They thought it was just going to be a demo.
Yeah.
But then that did it. But obviously it was worrisome for us because we thought, hey, this is going to be their first impression.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think there is a little bit of a misconception from people who are not as deep in the education world that ChatGPT is sufficient as your personal 24/7 ambient tutor, and they're not realizing how much goes into the product layer surrounding that core unit of intelligence, or the model itself. Tell me more about how you've thought about developing Conigo. How does it actually bring in Socratic principles? How does it actually embed pedagogy into the product?
Yeah, that's exactly right. ChatGPT is a great tool. It's great for us, it's great for adults, it's great if you're into prompting and you can save. I mean, it does a lot of good stuff. But as soon as you start talking about using it with children, they don't know when they're seeing a hallucination. They will sometimes try to take the conversations in inappropriate directions. They will try to do things that's not necessarily good for them, like cheat. And so you definitely need a much stronger moderation layer. Part of that moderation is to make it transparent to educators, to parents. The accuracy, the base models have improved dramatically, but this is where we put a lot of energy, and I hope people appreciate the energy. I think I don't even know if any other people are even doing this. We have a whole team that's working on evaluations of, the kind of the toughest cases where the AI makes math errors or makes hallucinations. And we're constantly tweaking it to see how quickly can we get that error rate down. I don't think anyone else is even measuring error rate for an AI. When we started this, the error rate in math was 15, 20% error rate. So that's not, it might be okay if you're a teacher and you're trying to create a lesson plan and you can recognize when there's an error, but it's not okay if you're a fourth grader. And so we've been doing a lot of work on the application layer to really improve that. Now the errors are sub 2%, 2 or 3%. We actually think they might even be a little bit lower. We haven't been able to fully run the evals on some of the latest models. And actually it turns out the biggest errors are not it's making math errors anymore. It's more of the answer is 1/3 and you, the student, put in 0.333. And sometimes the AI is saying, oh, good job, or not. Or, so these are the edge cases. But just anecdotally, when I'm tutoring my own children, I do think I have an error rate higher than 2%, where, I work it out in my head, and I'm like, no, I got something different. And then, my daughter or son would say, oh, and I look at the, oh, yeah, you did it right. And so but these are super important to get right. And then all of the infrastructure, we have something called Writing Coach, where the teacher creates the assignment with the AI, administers it through the AI, and then the students do the assignment with the AI. So there's a tool for brainstorming your thesis, outlining, and then drafting and getting feedback. And then what the AI gives the teacher isn't just the final output, but gives the whole process. And that's the type of thing that you need to undermine cheating. There was a 60 Minutes piece, and Anderson Cooper put in a 7th grade essay about his mom, Gloria Vanderbilt, and he tried to use ChatGPT for part of it, and he copy and pasted it in, and it flagged that part. So this part's a little bit different, it's not consistent, and it just kind of got copy and pasted. We didn't work on this. So yeah, there is a ton to be constantly thinking about, especially if you're using it with students.
Are you seeing any interesting insights or early learnings of putting this in front of kids? I saw Kirsten a couple of days ago, and she was telling me a little bit of the user behavior learnings that you all have seen in putting this into classrooms.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. I mean, there's a couple of things. I think right when anything is new, it's immediately like AI, and what's AI going to do, and what's AI? And we were a little bit in that mindset too a couple of years ago. But what we realize now that the real impact, I think, in the short run of Conigo is if it can help drive engagement on traditional Khan Academy practice. We have a ton of efficacy studies, and all of them revolve around students doing actual practice on the problems and getting feedback and that engagement at their learning edge. And videos were never the primary learning mechanism, but those are there to support you. The solutions we provide if someone gets it wrong, they're there to support you. And now AI, in theory, could be that extra level support. So that's where we are now, and we're at the very, very early stages. And what you see initially is there's about 10% to 15% of students who immediately get how to use the AI reasonably, constructively, and a lot of other students don't. And at first you're like, oh, wow, that's strange. It's so helpful. But then if you think about it, and I always like to model, like, okay, let's just model this to the real world. If I went into the back of a classroom and I said, hey, everyone, Sal here, I'm a tutor, I'm just going to sit back here. If any of y'all have any questions, just come and ask me. I think about 10 or 15% of students might actually do that. And so one thing that we are really working on is how do we rebuild, and we're going to have a pilot of this. It's going to be called Khan Academy Classroom for next back to school, where we're essentially rebuilding all of Khan Academy with an AI first, where Conigo is your concierge for the teacher. It is your concierge for the student. It's all happening. So instead of me being the tutor that's just sitting in the back of the room, say, hey, come ask me a question if you want, it's me being the tutor like, hey, welcome, Claire. Okay, what are we going to work? Hey, it's been 3 days. If you really want to finish this goal that the teacher gave you by the end of this week, we've got to put in a little bit more time. Or what can I do? You know, and okay, so let's start working on this. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, let's do it. And that, I think, positions Conigo to become more useful. We're also thinking, and you know, this is a sensitive subject for us, and honestly for me, I've personally made 7,000 videos. I'm not sure the shelf life anymore. I used to have fantasies that my great-grandchildren would learn calculus from me, and you know, maybe it'll be a historical footnote, but AI isn't evolving fast, custom content, et cetera. So we're also going to make it so that teachers can create custom content and administer it through Khan Academy, but also try to get insights that are meaningful. So it's not just random questions, it's actually trying to glean sense of, you know, how proficient or mastered students are and then use that for lesson planning. So these are the types of things we're thinking about to be in a better position to take advantage of the technology.
With that in mind, what do you, I know you probably get this question a lot, and I think we've heard a lot of answers that, you know, humans will always remain in the loop, but what do you actually see as the future of the teaching role?
My view is any role that leans into the human connection side of things is actually going to thrive in an AI world. And you know, I recently saw some think tank wrote the jobs most in threat from AI and least in threat, and I agreed with what they said. The most in threat, driving a vehicle, retail, copywriter, you know, these things, you're doing a task that we already know that these AIs can and that's going to create real social issues. You know, the biggest employer of 18 to 55-year-old men is driving a car globally, some type of vehicle. So we're going to have some real issues. But the jobs that were least going to be affected by AI in the view of this think tank, I think teaching was number 2 of the least affected. And I think that's because, and look, we see this at Khan Academy. I used to be a little naive, like, hey, if we make an awesome collection of videos and exercises and we just throw it out there, all of a sudden, you know, millions of kids are going to learn way faster than ever. And look, there are some kids that this became their lifeline and they raced ahead. But for most kids, it was a supplement. It was their teacher in the classroom that was the motivating force that gave them the motivation to study their textbook or come to Khan Academy. And we see that today with Khan Academy. If you just throw that into the wild, you're not going to get the engagement. But when you have a district or a teacher that is really bought into it and using it and supporting the students and using the data and walking up to them and saying, okay, what can I do with you? Clearly you're blocked someplace. Then all of a sudden you get massive engagement. So I see a world with AI. Yeah, it's analogous to if every teacher on the planet had amazing teaching assistants, but the teacher's still in charge, and teachers will hopefully have to spend less time writing lesson plans, less time writing progress reports, less time eventually grading. We don't do grading yet, but it's coming. And more time, less time writing quizzes, et cetera, and more time just being face-to-face with students, getting insights on what students need. You know, when I go into a fundraising guide, I have to raise a lot of money for Khan Academy. We have a small philanthropy team that says, Sal, make sure to talk to that person because they really care about the work we're doing in assessment. Make sure you talk to that person about our newest efficacy study because that's what they care about. And that makes my job easier and it makes me more effective. AI is going to do that for teachers. It's going to be whispering in their ear that, hey, look, Claire's looking a little bit disengaged. You should go chat with her. And here, by the way, is something that you might want to mention to her. It's your choice. You're the teacher. And I think that'd be a very exciting time to be teaching.
Yeah. You mentioned this job report, and I think there has been this narrative that AI is going to take over a lot of jobs. Luckily, it sounds like teaching is still very much so intact, and nothing's going to replace the role of, you know, empathizing with student, understanding how they are doing social emotionally. But as you think about this, there are a lot of educators in the room, leaders of institutions, Gen Zs themselves, who are at this very, you know, distinct point of uncertainty, and you have this very unique window into where the tech is heading. How do we future-proof ourselves? What becomes even more important in the age of AI?
Yeah, and I have some views. I wrote a book, Brave New Words, and I have a chapter on this, like how do you essentially future-proof. And I point out, just even take a step back on this teacher element. Even when Khan Academy first came out, people say, "Oh, is Khan Academy going to replace teachers?" I was like, look, if you think that the only thing that a teacher does is deliver a lecture, maybe, but it's not. Mm-hmm. There was a time where some folks were worried that textbooks were going to replace teachers. There was a bit of an uproar when the first textbooks came out 150 years ago. Oh, wait, I was the source, and I don't like this. But textbooks didn't replace teachers, and now it's hard to imagine teaching without a textbook. Khan Academy didn't replace teachers, but many people remember, and it's not my idea, flipped classroom, et cetera, but like if it could liberate when human beings come into the room to interact more, it could be a richer classroom. And so similar same thing with AI, but in terms of future-proofing skills, I think the economy, there's going to be like knowledge work, mm-hmm. and that might be amplified dramatically by AI. So being a coder of the future, being a writer of the future, being some type of a creative of the future. And what I would tell anyone who goes into that, this doesn't mean that if you want to do that you can kind of rest and not learn to write, and not learn to code, and not learn to do your math, because no one wants an editor who can't write as well as the staff writers, and the future staff writers are going to be AI. No one wants a software architect who can't write code as well as the junior engineers. The junior engineers going forward are going to be the AI. So I think if you want to amplify your skills, you're going to have to you have to upskill, not downskill. But you're going to have to add what I would only call entrepreneurship. It doesn't necessarily mean starting a new company, but it means being able to put pieces together in novel ways to do novel things. And the pieces are changing every day. I mean, if we check Twitter later today, we'll probably see some new AI tool that I'm like, oh, maybe I should be using that somehow, et cetera. So it's that ability to constantly be integrating this stuff to amplify. But I think the great bulk of humanity, actually, in theory, AI is going to drive our productivity a lot higher. We'll become a wealthier society. And in a wealthier, more abundant society, we'll hopefully have more resources to address a lot of other issues that we have. We have a loneliness epidemic. We have seniors who aren't being taken care of. So what if, in a more abundant society, we should be able to have a higher teacher-to-student ratio. In a more abundant society, we might be able to hire more people to go and take care of our elderly. And what's the skill there? Well, it's empathy. It's ability to really connect with someone and care about them. Be a salesperson. I give the example of a restaurant. Restaurants have never been the most efficient or cheapest way to get a good meal. They're expensive. But why do we go to restaurants? And why do we like crowded restaurants? And there's been experiments where people have these little kiosks. No one likes those restaurants. Yeah. Those can't be high-end restaurants. People pay a premium for a crowded restaurant that's bustling, where a waiter comes up to you and talks to you, and you have this human experience. And so I think that's always going to be a premium. And so anyone who can really lean into that human side and the exciting thing is, the skills like communication and empathy, creativity, sense of humor, which are super important in life, historically those have never shown up on like your SAT score or on your college transcript, but they could in the future.
And do you think there are ways to assess that with AI?
We're going to have to be careful with assessment, but how do we assess it today? If you're going on a date with someone, you're assessing their sense of humor by going on a date. But there's all sorts of biases and et cetera. Job interviews are one way to do it. I do think that you're going to be able to have assessments in the future leveraging AI and that can start to give a read on your communication skills, your sense of humor, your salesmanship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have to be careful, it's not biased, et cetera, but there's ways of benchmarking that. You could use AI to create a bunch of agents of different races, different genders, that are all equivalent, and just make them all go through the process with equivalent senses of humor, and just make sure that it's not showing a bias, which you can never do with a human. Human interviewers are incredibly biased, but we've never benchmarked it. It's always been like, oh yeah, we know, but there's nothing else we can do. So yeah, I hope that we have an assessment project on the future of assessment at Khan Academy. we're going to be taking baby steps where it'll look like a traditional assessment, but then it might ask the student to explain their reasoning. Or you do a reading comprehension question before you see the choices. Hey, what do you think is the author's intent? Type it out, and then you see the choices. So that's a baby step. But yeah, in the future, it could be just a live conversation. It could feel like a thesis defense at a PhD, but you could do it at scale, and you could start to capture some of these things that used to be called intangibles.
Yeah, as opposed to our current system of multiple choice questions, quite literally having an AI system watch you, formative assessment delivered. Cool, we are up on time, but I have one more question for you. You've started Khan Academy almost, prescient in the sense that you kind of saw the rise of scaling access to videos on Khan Academy, and now in this AI moment. If you look 10 years out, what's something you believe now that might sound a little crazy, but could totally feel obvious in 2035?
Yeah, I mean, the one that pops into my head, that every time I think it, I'm like, no, that's maybe too much. But EdTech, we've all been held captive by the device for the last 20 years. The mobile device or the laptop. That's where we think where you interface with technology. It's where you would interface with Khan Academy or whatever. I think AI is going to allow it to be ambient. And so it's going to feel a lot more like, and it's creepy if it's not done well, but that thing where the AI is whispering to the teacher, the AI can see the classroom.
Okay.
And the kids don't even necessarily have to be on a screen. The AI it might be an Alexa type device that's maybe with vision that's able to talk. It could be, it's a little bit augmented reality contact lenses that everyone's wearing. Yeah. That the AI is there and it's walking around. You can go on a, virtual reality, go on a magic school bus ride into the circulatory system, et cetera. If you asked me 5 years ago, I'd be like, that's like 50 years out, if then. But I think probably in 5 years, 5 years we'll probably see prototypes of that. In 10 years, we'll probably see some real use cases.
Okay, good note to end on. Sal, thank you so much for sharing your time and vision, and join me in thanking Sal.
Thank you.